You know the story. A princess locked away in a lonely tower, her hair cascading down for a handsome prince. But the real Rapunzel tale, buried in the Brothers Grimm version published in 1812, was not about magic. It was about a pregnant teenager punished for a secret affair and locked away without hope of escape. Behind the fairy tale lies a disturbing reality. For centuries, real girls like Rapunzel were banished to silent prisons, their hair cut, their voices erased, all in the name of protecting morality. So why did society build so many towers? And who decided which girls had to climb inside? Side by side, the 1812 and the 1857 editions of Rapunzel reveal more than a simple revision. They expose an act of erasure. In the earliest printing, Rapunzel's innocence is betrayed by her own words. She confides that her clothes have grown tight around her waist, a plain sign of pregnancy in the language of the time. Later, the text states directly that she gave birth to twins while in exile. These lines leave no doubt about what has happened, or why the punishment comes. By the time Wilhelm Grimm completes his final revision in 1857, the pregnancy line is gone. The moment of discovery is rewritten, shifting attention from Rapunzel's body to a clumsy slip about the prince's visits. The twins remain at the end of the tale, but their origin is left unexplained, the cause vanished from the record. This deliberate omission alters how readers understand the story. Critical editions and facsimile pages from German archives confirm this change. The 1812 volume, catalogued in major literary collections, preserves the original passage in clear, unambiguous prose. In the 1857 edition, that sentence is missing, replaced by language more suitable for the growing market of children's books. Wilhelm Grimm's editorial hand is visible not just in what he writes, but in what he chooses to omit. The evidence is there in black and white. The story's most troubling truth was not forgotten, but deliberately cut away. At the heart of the story stands a tower, built not for shelter, but for complete control. The text describes a structure with no door, no stairs, and walls so high that escape is impossible. Only a single narrow window interrupts the stone, positioned far above the ground, out of reach, out of hope. Rapunzel's only contact with the outside world comes through this window, and even that is tightly managed. The sorceress Dame Gothel climbs up by calling for Rapunzel to let down her hair, which has grown 20 ells long, over 20 yards, serving as a living rope. No ladder, no key, no secret passage, just the girl's own body as the mechanism of entry and exit. This design forces Rapunzel into utter dependence. She cannot leave, cannot summon help, and cannot refuse the one person who holds power over her. The space itself becomes a tool of discipline, making isolation total and escape unthinkable. The tower's architecture is not a backdrop, but a method of control, engineered to keep a young girl visible only on the Guardian's terms and invisible to the rest of the world. In every detail, the story's prison is not just high and locked, it is absolute, reducing Rapunzel's world to a single room, a single window, and a single relationship that defines every moment of her life. A barren couple lives in quiet desperation, unable to have a child. When the wife becomes pregnant, she develops a craving for Rapunzel greens growing in the walled garden next door. The husband, desperate to ease her suffering, climbs the wall and steals the forbidden plants. He is caught by Dame Gothel, the garden owner, who is known for her power and frightening authority. Faced with her anger, the husband pleads for mercy. Gothel agrees to spare him, and she demands the couple promise her their unborn child. When the baby girl is born, Gothel arrives to claim her. She names the child Rapunzel and raises her as her own, keeping the child completely isolated from the world. At the age of 12, Rapunzel is locked in a tower deep in the forest. The tower has no door and no stairs, only a single window high above the ground. Gothel alone visits, climbing Rapunzel's hair, now grown 20 ells long, to reach her. Years pass in this solitary life. One day a prince hears Rapunzel singing from her window. Drawn by her voice, he learns Gothel's method and begins secret visits. The prince and Rapunzel fall in love. Their secret is eventually betrayed when Rapunzel remarks that her clothes have grown tight around her waist. Gothel, realizing what has happened, cuts off Rapunzel's hair and casts her into the wilderness. In exile, Rapunzel gives birth to twins. Meanwhile, Gothel uses the severed hair to lure the prince. He falls from the tower and is blinded. The story leaves Rapunzel alone, a mother of two, and the prince wandering sightless, each punished for their forbidden connection. Parish and civil registers from the 19th century reveal a landscape shaped by numbers as much as by fear. In France, official records show that illegitimate births made up less than 5% of all births, a small fraction measured against the total. Yet the stigma attached to these births was immense, far outweighing their statistical presence. In Germany and Austria, around 1900, the proportion was higher, settling between 8 and 10%. Even these numbers remained a clear minority. Regional differences mattered, but the pattern was consistent. The mere possibility of an out-of-wedlock pregnancy carried consequences that extended well beyond the family. Communities tracked these births closely, entering them into parish books and civil ledgers, each entry a mark against a woman's reputation. The risk was not just personal, but social. An entire system of surveillance and judgment, built on numbers that in reality were never more than a fraction of the whole. For women, the threat of exposure was constant, no matter how rare the event itself. The pressure created by these statistics set the stage for what happened when a pregnancy could not be hidden, and when the law stepped in. Court records from 19th century England reveal a grim pattern. Most women prosecuted for killing their newborns or hiding a birth were unmarried domestic servants. These young women lived and worked inside their employers' homes, with little privacy and no room for a secret pregnancy. When their condition became impossible to hide, dismissal was almost certain, along with public disgrace and the loss of any future reference. For some, the pressure became unbearable. From 1838 to 1840, the Old Bailey in London recorded 76 murders of infants under 1 year old. Many of these cases involved women whose pregnancies had been hidden from employers and neighbours, only to be discovered after the birth, and often after the death of the child. Trials hinged on medical evidence and the question of intent, but the outcome rarely changed the underlying reality. The law treated unwed motherhood as a potential crime. The stories behind these numbers are marked by desperation. A servant's pregnancy could mean ruin, not just for herself, but for her entire family. The threat of prosecution and the spectacle of the courtroom served as a warning to every woman in her position. In this world, the consequences of a secret relationship were not limited to shame or exile. They could be fatal. In the aftermath of the Council of Trent, Catholic Europe set out to reform not just doctrine, but the lives of women seen as morally suspect. City charters and royal decrees from the late 16th and 17th centuries established casas de recogidas and casas de arrepentidas, houses designed to enclose prostitutes, adulteresses, and girls considered at risk of sexual transgression. These institutions were not imagined as temporary shelters. Their barred windows and locked doors mirrored the logic of the fairy tale tower, removing women from public view and placing them under the strict surveillance of nuns, priests, or city officials. By 1758, a new model took root in London with the founding of the Magdalen Hospital for the reception of penitent prostitutes. Merchant Robert Dingley and preacher William Dodd, among others, promoted the hospital as a place for repentance and reform. The founding charter described its mission in terms of rescue, but the reality was closer to incarceration. Women and girls, some as young as their early teens, entered on terms set by the institution, with little chance of leaving at will. These early blueprints, Trent era Casus in Spain and Italy, and the 1758 London Magdalen, set the pattern for a carceral network that would spread across Europe and beyond. For more than 2 centuries, religious and civic authorities drew on this model to justify the confinement of women whose sexuality or poverty threatened the social order. The timeline of these institutions stretches from the Renaissance to the modern age, their walls built on the promise of redemption, but maintained by the machinery of control. In Ireland, the system of Magdalen laundries persisted deep into the 20th century, operating almost entirely out of public sight. Records gathered by a 2013 state inquiry known as the McAleese Report identified 10,012 women and girls who entered these institutions between 1922 and 1996. The actual number is believed to be far higher, closer to 30,000, because many admissions went unrecorded, especially in earlier decades, or when girls were transferred from other institutions. Entry could happen through the courts, state agencies, religious orders, or even family members, with the line between voluntary and forced admission often blurred. Most of the women and girls confined in these laundries were there for reasons tied to sexuality, reputation, or simply being considered at risk. Ages ranged widely, but teenagers made up a significant portion, with some girls admitted as young as 9 or 10. Inside, they worked long hours in commercial laundries, washing clothes for hospitals, hotels, and government offices without pay and under strict discipline. The doors were locked. Leaving was rare. The last Magdalene laundry in Ireland closed in October 1996, a date that places this system not in the distant past, but in living memory. Survivor testimony and official records together reveal a scale of confinement that stretches across generations, reaching into nearly every county in the country. At the age of 12, Rapunzel's fate is sealed not by accident, but by a rule written into the fabric of medieval law. Canon law across Europe held that 12 was the threshold when a girl became marriageable, old enough, in the eyes of church and court, to bear children and to be watched more closely for signs of sexual danger. The story's timing is precise. Rapunzel is locked away the moment her body is presumed capable of sex and motherhood, turning a legal fiction into a lived sentence. Control did not stop at walls. Across centuries, women accused of sexual transgressions faced punishment that targeted their bodies, often starting with their hair. In 1314, Marguerite de Bourgogne, a French queen accused of adultery, was stripped of her status and shorn before being locked in a fortress. Chronicles from the period describe her haircutting as both spectacle and warning, a visible act that marked her as dishonored, set apart from her former life. Echoes of this ritual survived into the 20th century. In Magdalen laundries, survivors recall the shock of arrival, civilian clothes taken away, heads forced down, hair hacked short or shaved in silence. One woman, admitted at 14, later described the scissors as the first thing you heard, a sound that meant the outside world was gone and a new identity imposed. For generations, the cut hair stood as a visible line between girlhood and a regime of discipline, a sign that the body itself had become the site of control. Dame Gothel's name carries a history that rarely surfaces in translation. In early New High German, Gothel is not a witch's title, but a role, cognate with godmother, sponsor, or foster mother. For centuries, godmothers and midwives acted as go-betweens, wielding quiet authority over children born into uncertain circumstances. In city records from late medieval Germany and Austria, women appear as official intermediaries, their names entered in brothel ordinances and municipal contracts. These were the Frauenwirte, the female brothel keepers, licensed by town councils to oversee houses where women worked and lived under strict rules. Their power was not magical, but contractual and economic. Brothel ordinances from cities like Nuremberg and Augsburg spell out the terms. Housekeepers could take in girls from poor families, sometimes delivered by parents or intermediaries, and bind them to the house for a set number of years. The women under their care owed debts for clothing, food, and lodging, creating a cycle that made leaving almost impossible without permission. Attempting to run away or to conduct business outside the house brought fines or harsher penalties. The ordinances list the responsibilities of the keeper: discipline, health, payment of city fees, and the punishments for disobedience or escape. In these ledgers and contracts, the brothel keeper is both guardian and jailer, standing between the authorities and the women whose labor she controls. Dame Gothel's bargain, taking Rapunzel from her parents in exchange for a handful of greens, echoes these arrangements. Poor families, unable to provide for a child, might surrender her to a woman who promised care, discipline, or a path to survival. But once inside, the girl's fate belonged to the gatekeeper. The power to name, to confine, and to decide when or if she could leave all rested with this intermediary. The story's sorceress is not just a villain, she is the human face of a system that turned guardianship into control and care into captivity. Through the lens of city archives and linguistic roots, Gothel's tower is less a fantasy than a reflection of real-world brokerage, where the line between protector and trafficker could vanish with the stroke of a pen. Rapunzel's story does not end with a simple escape or happy reunion. Instead, it draws a map of irreversible damage, one that mirrors the fate of countless real women pushed to the margins for crossing invisible lines. Cast out from the tower, Rapunzel is left alone in the wilderness, her children born far from any home, her name stripped from the world she once knew. The prince, blinded by thorns as he falls from the tower, wanders sightless for years. His punishment is not just physical, but social, cut off from his title, his family, and the life he expected. Both are erased in different ways, she by exile, he by blindness, each marked by a kind of disappearance that leaves no easy path back. For women in 19th century Europe, the reality behind this pattern was lived in poorhouses, workhouses, and asylums. An unmarried mother, once exposed, might find herself dismissed from service, refused by her family, and barred from respectable work. The only doors left open often led to institutions designed less for help than for containment. In these spaces, records show women cycling from one institution to another, rarely regaining a place in ordinary society. A single mistake, or even just the suspicion of one, could mean permanent removal from public life. The prince's blindness echoes a different kind of loss, the way society could render a person invisible, their story left untold, their presence unacknowledged. For Rapunzel, the wilderness is not freedom, but a sentence, a place where survival is possible, but belonging is not. For the prince, blindness is a life spent searching for what cannot be recovered. Together, their fates reflect a system that punishes not just the act, but the very possibility of transgression, sealing away those who do not fit and leaving their stories in darkness. Centuries after Rapunzel's tower, institutions still police women's bodies, sometimes with new names, sometimes with old justifications. In Ireland, the last Magdalene laundry closed just 28 years ago. Control, silence, and shame persist, reshaped but not erased. The real question isn't why these towers were built, but how many still cast shadows we choose not to see. Thanks for watching. Share your thoughts below.